promised from my previous video or my latest video, I am far from finished with this balcony. There are so many more steps to finish and change and be done with. And as promised, this video is focusing on turning leftovers of these into this. What I'm going to make out of the wooden tiles are handmade, perfectly sized and width and length and height plant boxes, which are also going to include, they are, I think they're called trellis. They are like privacy fences that you can have attached either to a wall or fence outside, and you can also attach them to plant boxes. These are perfect because then I can hang some tiny pots with plants in them and maybe have some kind of vine looking plants, so it will look like I have a privacy fence on one side of the balcony, but it's all going to contain a lot of plants. I'm going to show you all the tiles that I'm going to use and the process of making a plant box out of all of these leftover tiles. So this is the finished plant box that I did, that I'm going to have as a guide and reference when I'm working with the other plant box. And as you noticed, these are made up of two different styles of wooden tiles. The shorter ones are obviously from the tiles that I have on my balcony, and these pieces here, they're longer, so they're from another style of wooden tiles. So they just have a set of longer pieces that are just going in one direction. These are actually leftover pieces from my sister's balcony. So I decided to take these and see if I can make something out of them. And the measurements of all of these parts are perfect measurements for the area that I want to have these plant boxes, because I looked everywhere for plant boxes that had the perfect measurements, and the length of these shorter pieces actually created the perfect width of this box that I made. And then if I combined two pieces next to each other of these other style of wooden tiles, it gave me the perfect length for 1/3 of the shorter side of the balcony. You can count on having to buy 3 of the tiles that are with these longer pieces, and combined this entire plant box has 18 pieces of these shorter ones, so you only need 1.5 tile of these ones that are with the shorter pieces. The extra pieces that you see here, if you're not supposed to create legs for these, you can just skip these parts and just have one set of these shorter pieces, because this part up here is supposed to keep the bottom pieces together, but the extra part here is just for stability when it comes to having a support system here for the legs. So this is the entire construction of this plant box, and I'm going to show you the process of how I made this. So this entire pile are pretty much all of the leftover wood pieces from the tiles that I have, and I'm just going to make sure that the only pieces that I have left now are all the pieces that are supposed to be for the actual box of this plant box assembly, and we're going to focus on the actual construction of the legs later in the video. So the first step here is to remove all of these plastic parts. The easiest way I found is just to use some pliers and make sure that I cut it as close as I can to the actual piece that is stuck in that hole. To get rid of these, because they are pretty snug in there, I have to use another plier and then just press it and make sure that I hold it. Then I just wiggle it back and forth, and then, well, this one didn't really work. Sometimes these plastic parts doesn't really want to get removed. If that happens, I try to maybe flatten it by pressing it into the hole, because where these holes aren't actually the place that I'm going to screw these pieces together, so it's not going to be that much of an issue. Yes, it all depends on how soft this plastic. Maybe if this one, yeah, this one worked. It just popped right off here. So that's how I'm going to do now. I'm going to focus on removing all of these plastic parts. I'm like halfway done with sanding against the grain technique, and I just figured out that I did another technique when I was working on the last pieces of the wooden tiles that I had on the Florida balcony. A quicker method to get rid of this mahogany stain. I have to use the 240 grit first, because when I'm evening out the surface with a finer grit sandpaper, it seems to help remove the stain much quicker. Since it evens out the surface, it's much easier for the rougher sandpaper, which is the 80 grit Texas Hack. This is just with the 80 grit, and this is with 240 grit first, and then going with the 80 grit against the grain. I'm obviously going to go with 80 grit with the grain, and then 240 grit. And that decreases the amount of sanding that I have to do. A much quicker technique to get rid of this darker stain, and left me a very fine, shiny, smooth surface. So all of the parts are now sanded down to a 240 grit finish, and I have actually cleaned them now, and they're just in the process of drying. Even though I sanded all of the surfaces with the 80 grit, it still has these stains on it. They are very hard to remove, but since there are so few of these pieces that have stains like these, I'm just going to make sure that these are the parts that are going to be in the areas that are less visible. These are definitely going to be in the bottom. This could be used for backside, since these are 6 pieces that has less damage, but they'll have more damage than these parts. And I realized that the bottom piece only needs 4 of these instead of 6. So I have 2 left over here that I can use for the legs. But just so you know, when you're working on the plant box, you only leave 6 for the front and back and 4 for the bottom. It's going to make more sense once we're actually assembling all of these pieces. So this is basically the construction. The easiest way for me to know the measurement of how much the space in between each of these pieces is going to be is just by placing one of these shorter tiles, and then just make sure that where the edge of this one is, I have one of these pieces, and when the bottom of this edge is, I have the third of the pieces here, and then I can just figure out how much space I need in between these 2 pieces, so I know that they have a even space in between. The reason also why I have this part here is, first of all, most importantly, is to have stability and support for these pieces, but also the other part is the illusion to make it look like these are double the length, so it looks like it's one long piece of wood here. It isn't really that complicated of a construction here. I found the easiest way was to start with the longer sides, and then I can add the shorter sides, because these ones are just loose. They have no support on the back or anything, so that's why it's easier for me to have this already pre-made. And the last step is going to be the bottom, because that's going to have the support of all of the other sides. I first want to see which ones are the closest to each other when it comes to the shade of the grain and the wood itself. So having this prepared, I actually turn these with the bottom side facing up, and then I'm just going to staple them together using a stapler like this, just to make sure that they stay together. I'm going to place them on the back side and also on the front. Just make sure that they are stable when I'm going to actually screw one of these pieces. Nothing complicated, just like that. Only annoying thing about it is pretty loud. If you're sensitive to sounds, I am a bit sensitive, so thankfully this is a quick process. And you can actually let these ones stay here when you're going to apply the shorter piece, because this one is going to cover up space where these ones are attached. You won't be able to see them anyways. And I feel like it's better support to keep them there when I'm going to pre-drill some holes and then just add the screws. And I'm going to add the screws on the back side, so I'm screwing it from the back up, because I want to have more of an invisible attachment. But it looks like these aren't actually screwed together. It looks like this piece is just attached. So the first step I'm doing when I'm going to attach these longer pieces to this shorter piece is I actually start with just one of these and make sure that it's as close to the edge as possible, and trying to make sure that it's lined to the center as best as I can. Can sort of adjust the wooden pieces a little bit after after they have been screwed together. This wood is very soft and very fragile, so you have to make sure that you're pre-drilling before you're actually adding a screw through this wood. So I start with a small drill I possibly can, and I go over with a little bit bigger, but not bigger than the actual screw, and then I go over with a screw. The attachment is actually supposed to be 2 screws, one top and one in bottom. Because now that I have only 1 screw, it's actually starting to wiggle a bit. So I'm going to attach 2 screws here, and that's going to help make sure that this won't wiggle. I'm just going to drill one more hole here, just to make sure that it's going to stay in place as an extra support. I was doing this too fast. Oh, I wasn't paying attention. I should have looked at the plant box that I already have done, but I was just too excited to start assembling these parts. But that's an easy mistake to just fix, and it's not going to affect the finished result and the attachment of all the other pieces. So yeah, that's pretty much is straightforward what I'm going to do. This is the exact same process all the way through, but I'm just going to show you later how I'm placing the parts that are going to be on the longer pieces, because they're going to be a bit further out for the actual attachment to the shorter sides of this plant box. Alright, so now when it comes to the sides of this side piece, we have 2 more of these to attach. This part actually needs to be sticking out a bit, so I can be able to attach the shorter side pieces. First of all, have a nice finish and a nice looking edge here, but also have a constructive system where it's actually going to be having support it needs to actually stay in place. So I just used the thickness of this wooden piece I have as a guide, so I know how far out this piece needs to stick out. They can still bend a bit even though they're attached with 4 screws, so I can adjust them so they are edge to edge with the wooden piece that I'm attaching here, so I know they have a even space like they have in the middle piece. So here you can see this amount of edge sticking out is perfect. So I'm just going to add a mark using a pen, and I'm going to do the same drilling process as I did on the middle. I'm going to attach 2 screws, one on top and one on the bottom, and then it seems like I have only applied just 2 screws out here on this wooden piece, so it goes into this wooden piece. This is what it looks like when one of the longer sides and the shorter sides is attached. You can see they are a little bit wonky right now here, but they are going to even themselves out when I'm attaching the other longer side. And I'm going to do this part off camera, and then I'm going to show you the construction of how I'm going to make it look like more of a rectangle, and then I'm going to show you how I actually did the bottom piece of this plant box. So as promised, I have completed one more side. Instead of adding these shorter corners to this one, I decided to add it to the piece I did earlier, because I find it easier for me to attach this one if I have both sides of this one already attached. I can now place it on top of the side that I did before. You may see that these parts here, they bend in like this. They are perfectly straight, but as soon as I attach the bottom piece, it's actually going to help push these parts so they are going to want to stay more straight. When it comes to attaching the screws and drilling some holes on all of these parts, it's better to work in steps, because if I try to align them now, the whole piece is going to move around. So it's better to have it stuck in one spot, and then it's easier for me to make sure that this one stays in place for me to align this one. Since it's a bit hard for me to hold this plank here in place so it's aligning with the longer plank up here, I just attached the screw bit here, which is the perfect width to actually make sure that this piece stays straight and just aligning right with the other piece here. sides done now. It's pretty straightforward, like I mentioned. It's so simple to do this. So the bottom part is only made from 2 rows of these longer pieces. I think the space in between is supposed to be the exact same width as these pieces. So I had these as guides, so I can have this and know that it's the exact same space in between. So the steps on how I made the bottom piece, the exact same steps that I did here. I attached 2 pieces like this and use a stapler. I have this part staying here during the time that I'm actually drilling and screwing this piece in place, so I know that these parts have the same space all the time. When I'm attaching this one, I'm making sure that I have the same width as the top piece here. So that's what I'm going to do now. And the only difference is that I try to make sure that the width here is the same as one of these pieces. And everything else is basically the same thing I did on the box part here. Finally, the last step. This is going to be probably the easiest step now. Just to pop this bottom piece on. Sometimes you have to use force because it's pretty tight. So you know it's going to stay in place once I use the screws for the last parts. I know you can see here it's going inward like that. I'm just gonna figure out what I'm going to place in these spaces here so I know that the alignment looks correct before I even start drilling and adding the screws. So construction wise, this is pretty much finished. This is pretty much how far if you want to make just the plant box itself. If you're not interested in adding any legs to this, then this is all you need. Obviously, I have a few steps left, which is adding a plastic bag on the inside of this one. And obviously I'm going to add a very nice oil finish to this one because this wood is so pale right now. But if I wasn't doing this while I was recording, I would have waited until the entire piece was finished before I add the oil finish. Yeah, that's what I'm going to show you now. For the inside of this plant box, I'm going to use, it's one of those black trash bags. It's a much thicker material than a regular plastic bag and it's much more durable and it can handle a lot of weight and all that, so it's very strong. I think this one is like the half of the trash bag that I used for the other plant box, so it's still a lot left here. As support to make sure that the plastic stays in place when I'm working on the next area and all, I have these cute tiny little clamps here. They're perfect for holding the plastic bag while I'm going around it. And then I'm just going to use stapler like I used before and just staple all the plastic in place here. These are all the parts that I'm going to need. Not going to be that complicated. I have also done some preparation work on these pieces, meaning I have sanded all these pieces down and then I have added a oil finish to them. The longer pieces here, just the back side are stapled together. The reason why I haven't stapled the front pieces are these are not going to be covered up. They're going to be the visible part of the legs, but it's going to have this stability and support on the back side. And it's all going to make much more sense once we're actually assembling all of these pieces together. The first part that I want to focus on are the supports that are going to be here. There's going to be where the actual legs are going to be attached, making sure that they have a very stable support. And the construction is built of 3 of these pieces. I'm going to have to make a few steps before I'm actually screwing this piece so it's attached to the bottom of the plant box. If I don't, then I'm not going to be able to reach the areas that I want to have some of these other pieces attached to. The construction that I did is, if you see this part here, if I turn it over, I'm going to add 2 screws here and here, so it means that the screws are going from the bottom up into these wooden pieces, so they stay like this. And then afterwards, when they look like this, I'm going to add 2 screws, one here and one there, just to make sure that this one stays in place. And then when that's attached, then I can start with the actual legs. Before I'm assembling all these 3 pieces together like that, I want to make sure that I have pre-drilled some holes into the piece that is here, because I know that it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to reach the inside here with the screwdriver. Probably going to have to use a screwdriver like this, and probably have to screw in the screws by hand like this, because that's the easiest way for me to make sure that this one is stuck in there. So I was able to attach these using the mechanical screwdriver here. They are ready for me to attach the legs, but before I start to attach the actual legs, I want to do a little bit of work with the legs before they're going to be attached. And it's going to be much easier for me to do this instead of having to do this when they are attached to the actual plant box and then try to get in all of those nooks and crannies and all the corners and try to get a even attachment with the screws. So what I'm going to do, I need something on the back side here for these 2 pieces to have more stability and support. To do this construction, I'm gonna look at my other plant box and get an idea of the amount of screws that I need and how I attach them. So this is what I think could work to have more of a stability and support, and the easiest way for me to attach all these pieces together before I'm attaching it to the plant box. So I have decided to add 2 screws here and here, so the middle piece of these 2 are going to be attached to one of these pieces. And then I have decided to add 1 screw top and bottom, because I'm going to make sure that I have 2 screws that are going in that direction. So this piece that I have here going to go in like that, and have the other part here, just as I did on the piece that I recently attached to the plant box. So the reason why I have 1 screw hole here is because since this one is going to have 2 screws that goes in here, I do not want to risk having another screw that is going to hit one of these screws. At least I'm going to be able to attach this piece to this piece and press them together as much as I can. So I'm going to attach these pieces together, and I'm going to do the same drilling style that I did on these to all of these pieces here, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to actually attach them to the bottom of the plant box. I got 2 finished legs now, so they are hopefully going to be stable enough to handle the weight of the plant box. The actual box doesn't weigh that much, so take a lot before these are going to break. Popping these ones on. I might have to use some of these clamps to make sure that the pieces doesn't want to move around. Like I said, these pieces are just leftovers from some old wooden tiles, so they aren't perfect. They are a bit damaged, like they have water damage, discoloration. You can see that some of these have warped a bit. But obviously if you would do this with brand new of these tiles, you wouldn't have the same problem. I'm obviously going to start with one piece at a time, because when I try to move this one, even though I have these clamps on, this one might want to move also. So it's better to make sure that one side is done first and just move on to the other side. I'm just going to attach them like here, and maybe if I feel like I have to, I might add some extra screws here in the middle just to make sure that it's really staying there. So the entire plant box is now finished. I have created the actual box and I have added the legs, so it's as tall as I want them to be for the plants to actually get some sun and all that. The whole idea about trying to attach the trellis to the backside of the plant box, I decided to actually scrap that idea, because I actually tried to do the construction of seeing if I could be able to attach them to the backside of the plant boxes, but it turned out that it was a little bit more difficult, and when I tried it was a bit too wobbly and it looked very uneven. Since I wanted it to look like the whole side of the balcony had like a privacy fence, it was going to be too difficult to do that if I had it attached to the backside of the plant boxes. So I decided to have them separate. What I did is I just used a curtain rod and placed it on the ceiling of the balcony, and then I just started first attaching them to the curtain rod using cable ties, and then when the trellis were expanded to the length that I wanted them to be, then I started to attach them together using cable ties also. And then as a finishing touch, I decided to add some fake plants, like some greenish plants, some ivy leaves, some vine looking leaves, something just to make it look more alive, more something is happening there. But still, it's a lot of space right now there. There's still a lot of visibility when it comes to the windows of that side of the balcony. So I am gonna try and see if I in the future can find some more of these fake plants, but also the goal is for these real ivy plants that I have to actually start growing so much that they will become more like vines that go up the entire trellis and fill that area up. I don't know yet what I'm going to do, but I'm gonna figure something out, or I will have some sort of fabric or something just for now to fill up those areas. That's pretty much it when it comes to the plan that I had when I was working on this project here. So I hope you really enjoyed the process of how I make one of these plant boxes out of leftover wooden tiles. And as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. It was very simple to do these. It's the most difficult or a little bit of a complicated part is the actual process of making the legs, but that's just my issue with it, because I had to rely on the pieces that I already had. Maybe it didn't have the most beautiful finish, but they still have a charm to it because they are reused for something else. I'm happy with the finished result of them, and yes, in the future I might just add something else for the legs. For the actual boxes that I made, they're beautiful as they are, and they could be perfect to just add some kind of hooks on the back side, and you can hang them on the fence of your balcony, on your patio, or just in your garden. Such an easy construction to make and very fast. So part 2 of the process of the balcony makeover is now done. And if you are looking forward to seeing me start working on actually painting something, then stay tuned for the upcoming video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I know I never really say this part in my videos, I seem to forget, but keep you notified when I am uploading stuff. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you feel like it. Also hit the bell button or bell notification button so you will be notified when I'm uploading stuff. Yeah, so part 2 is now done and part 3 is coming pretty soon.